Maya Chen's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she stepped off the bus. The building in front of her looked more like a palace than a school. Riverside Academy of Music stood tall with its white marble columns and enormous glass windows that sparkled in the afternoon sun. She'd seen pictures online, but nothing prepared her for how grand it actually was. She clutched her violin case closer to her chest. The case was old and covered in scratches. Her grandmother's name was still faintly visible on the side, written in careful handwriting that had faded over the years. Maya had tried to clean it up this morning, but some stains just wouldn't come out. It didn't matter, though. What mattered was what was inside. Other students were walking past her, heading into the building. They looked different from kids in her neighborhood. Their clothes were neat and expensive-looking. Designer bags hung from their shoulders. Some carried instrument cases that looked brand new, probably worth more than her family's monthly rent. One girl walked by carrying a violin case that seemed to glow, all polished wood and gold clasps. Maya looked down at her own outfit. Her mom had ironed her nicest dress that morning, the navy blue one they'd bought from the thrift store last year. It was clean and proper, but it didn't have that crisp new look that everyone else seemed to have. Her shoes were a bit scuffed too, no matter how much she'd tried to polish them. She took a deep breath and walked through the main doors. The entrance hall made her stop in her tracks. The ceiling seemed impossibly high with a crystal chandelier hanging in the center. The floor was so shiny she could almost see her reflection in it. Everything smelled clean and expensive, like fresh paint and furniture polish. It was nothing like the community center back home where she usually practiced, with its creaky floors and water-stained ceiling tiles. A sign with an arrow pointed toward the audition rooms. Maya followed it down a long hallway. Her footsteps echoed, and she became very aware of every sound she made. Other students passed by in small groups, chatting and laughing with each other. They all seemed to know exactly where they were going, like they belonged here. She didn't belong here. That's what the voice in her head kept saying. What was she thinking applying to a school like this? Kids here probably had private tutors since they were babies. They probably went to summer music camps in Europe. They probably had parents who were doctors and lawyers, not a cook and a seamstress. But then she remembered her grandmother's words. Music doesn't care about money, little bird. It only cares about heart. Her grandmother used to call her little bird because of how she'd sing while doing homework as a child. Maya found a wooden bench outside the audition room and sat down. The letter said to arrive at 2 o'clock. She was 15 minutes early. Better early than late, her mother always said. She placed her violin case carefully on her lap and waited. That's when she heard the voices. 3 men in expensive suits were standing about 20 feet away near a water fountain. They looked important. The kind of important that makes you want to sit up straighter. They were talking and laughing about something. Did you see the scholarship list this year? One of them said. He was tall with gray hair slicked back perfectly. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now. The second man, shorter and rounder with glasses, chuckled. I know what you mean. Standards have really dropped. In my day, you had to be exceptional just to audition here. It's all about diversity now, the third man added. He had a thin mustache and carried a leather folder under his arm. Doesn't matter if they can actually play. Just check the right boxes on the application. Maya's stomach tightened. Were they talking about her? About kids like her? Mark my words, the tall one continued. We'll spend half our time teaching them basic techniques that they should have learned years ago. But the board wants their feel-good stories, so here we are. They all laughed together like they'd shared a private joke. Then the tall one glanced in Maya's direction. His eyes swept over her, taking in her worn violin case and simple dress. He said something to the others, too quiet for Maya to hear, and they all looked her way. More chuckling followed. Maya felt her face get hot. She wanted to disappear into the wall. She wanted to run back to the bus stop and go home. Her hands gripped the violin case so tight her knuckles turned white. But she didn't move. She couldn't move. She'd promised her grandmother. On that hospital bed in those final days, her grandmother had made her promise to never give up on music. You have a gift, little bird. Don't let anyone tell you different. Promise me you'll keep playing no matter what, Maya had promised. And she wasn't about to break that promise because of 3 men in fancy suits. The door to the audition room opened and a boy walked out. He looked confident, almost smug. Behind him, a woman with a clipboard called out, Maya Chen? This was it. Maya stood up, her legs feeling wobbly. She walked toward the door, passing by the 3 men. As she got closer, she heard one of them mutter, "Another scholarship case. This should be amusing." The word stung, but Maya kept walking. She followed the woman into the audition room, and the sight nearly took her breath away. It was huge, with rows of empty seats and a stage at the far end. 5 people sat behind a long table, and she recognized the 3 men from the hallway among them. They were the judges. Of course they were. The tall one was already leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. The one with glasses had a bored expression on his face. The third one was checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. But there were 2 other judges too. An older woman with kind eyes and a younger man who gave her an encouraging nod. At least someone looked friendly. "Come on up, dear," the woman said. "Take your time." Maya walked to the center of the stage. Her footsteps sounded loud in the quiet room. She carefully set her case down and opened it. The brass clasps clicked open with a familiar sound that brought her comfort. This was her grandmother's violin. The same violin that had played in concert halls across China. The same violin that had taught her everything she knew. She lifted it out, and immediately she heard a snort from the judges' table. The violin looked old because it was old. The varnish was worn in places where thousands of hours of practice had left their mark. The strings were new because Maya had saved up to replace them last month, but everything else showed its age. "Is that instrument even playable?" the tall judge asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. Maya looked up at him. For a moment she considered saying something back, but her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind again. "Let your music speak for you, little bird. It speaks louder than any words ever could." So instead of answering, Maya just positioned the violin under her chin. Her hands had stopped shaking now. When she held her grandmother's violin, she always felt stronger. Like her grandmother was still there with her, guiding her fingers, believing in her. "I'll be playing Paganini's Caprice No. 24, she announced, her voice clearer than she expected. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the tall judge actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh. "Paganini? That's quite ambitious for someone your age." His tone made it clear he didn't mean it as a compliment. The round judge with glasses leaned forward. "Perhaps you'd like to choose something more suitable? Maybe a simple folk tune or a beginner's piece? There's no shame in knowing your limits." Maya felt all their eyes on her. The 3 men looked amused, like they were watching a comedy show. But the older woman judge seemed concerned, and the younger man looked curious. This was her moment. She could back down, choose something easier, and maybe avoid embarrassment. Or she could do what she came here to do. She could keep her promise. "I'd like to play what I prepared," Maya said quietly but firmly. "If that's all right." The tall judge waved his hand dismissively. "By all means. Let's see what you've got." He settled back in his chair with a smirk, clearly expecting to enjoy watching her fail. Maya took a breath. She raised her bow, and in that moment, with 5 judges staring at her and 3 of them already convinced she'd fail, something changed inside her. She wasn't scared anymore. She was ready. The first note that came from Maya's violin silenced the room instantly. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was pure and clear, like a drop of water hitting a still pond, but something about it made everyone stop whatever they were doing. The tall judge had been whispering something to the man next to him. He stopped mid-sentence. The round judge with glasses had been looking at his papers. He looked up. Even the one checking his watch froze with his hand still hovering over his wrist. Maya's eyes were closed. She'd learned to do this from her grandmother. "Don't play for them, little bird. Play for yourself. Play for the music. Let everything else disappear." So that's what she did. The audition room faded away. The judges faded away. All the fear and nervousness faded away. There was only her, the violin, and the music. Her fingers began to dance. The opening theme of Paganini's Caprice started simple enough, but Maya knew what was coming. She'd practiced this piece thousands of times in her tiny bedroom, the walls so thin she could hear her neighbor's television through them. She'd played it in the restaurant after closing time, while her parents cleaned tables and swept floors. She'd played it in her dreams. The melody grew more complex. Her left hand moved faster, fingers pressing down on the strings with perfect precision. Each note rang out crystal clear. No buzzing, no mistakes, just music that seemed to pour out of that old violin like it had been waiting years to be heard like this. The younger judge leaned forward in his seat. His mouth was slightly open. The older woman judge had put down her pen and was watching with focused attention. But the three who had laughed at Maya, they were the ones whose reactions mattered most right now. The tall one's smirk had vanished. His arms were no longer crossed. He was sitting up straight, staring at Maya like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Or hearing. Maya moved into the first variation. This was where the piece got tricky. Her bow had to move incredibly fast, creating rapid notes that sounded like a bird taking flight. Up and down the strings her fingers flew. Most violinists needed years of training to even attempt this section. Many gave up because it was simply too hard, but Maya's grandmother had been patient. Again, little bird. Try again, not because you did it wrong, but because you can do it better. Night after night, the same passages, over and over until her fingers ached, until she could play it in her sleep, until the violin felt like part of her body. The round judge removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, then put them back on. Like he thought maybe his vision was playing tricks on him. The sound coming from that worn, scratched violin was impossible. It shouldn't sound this good. It couldn't sound this good. Yet it did. Maya reached the part with double stops where she had to play 2 strings at once. This was where most students her age would stumble. The coordination required was intense. You had to press down on 2 strings simultaneously, while keeping both notes perfectly in tune. 1 millimeter off and it would sound wrong. Maya played it flawlessly. The 2 notes rang out together in perfect harmony, filling the audition room with rich, full sound. She moved through the double stops like they were nothing, like they were as easy as breathing. The judge with the mustache, the one who'd been checking his watch earlier, had completely forgotten about the time now. His watch sat ignored on his wrist as he stared at the 12-year-old girl making impossible music happen. But Maya wasn't thinking about any of them. She was somewhere else entirely. She was back in her grandmother's small apartment, the one that smelled like jasmine tea and old books. Her grandmother sitting in the chair by the window, eyes closed, listening. Good, little bird. Now put more feeling into this part. The notes are correct, but music is more than correct notes. It must have soul. Soul. That's what her grandmother always talked about. Technical skill was important, yes. You had to know where to put your fingers and how to move your bow. But the real magic happened when you poured your heart into it, when you played not just with your hands but with everything you were. Maya opened her eyes slightly as she moved into the 3rd variation. This section required rapid string crossings, jumping from one string to another with lightning speed. The bow had to be controlled perfectly. Too much pressure and the notes would screech. Too little and they'd be too quiet. She could see the judges now, all 5 of them completely focused on her. The older woman had tears in her eyes. The younger man was nodding slightly, keeping time with the music. And the 3 who had mocked her, they looked like they'd seen a ghost. The tall judge's face had gone pale. His mouth was a thin line, no trace of the earlier smugness. The round one was gripping the edge of the table, leaning so far forward he looked like he might fall out of his chair. The one with the mustache had his hand over his mouth, like he was physically stopping himself from making a sound. Maya dove into the 4th variation, the one that had taken her 6 months to master. Her left hand moved in ways that seemed almost unnatural, fingers stretching and contracting, hitting notes with absolute precision. The pizzicato section came next, where she had to pluck the strings with her fingers instead of using the bow. But this wasn't ordinary plucking. She had to pluck with her left hand while simultaneously bowing with her right. It was a technique so difficult that even professional violinists struggled with it. Many avoided this piece entirely because of this section, but Maya's grandmother had taught her the secret. Don't think of it as 2 separate actions. Think of it as one motion. Your hands are not fighting each other. They are dancing together. The plucked notes rang out sharp and clear while the bowed notes sang over top. The 2 sounds wove together, creating a texture that was both delicate and powerful. It sounded like 2 violins playing, not one. The judges looked at each other, confused and amazed. How was she doing this? Sweat was forming on Maya's forehead now. This piece demanded everything. Every ounce of focus. Every bit of strength. Her arm was starting to ache from the rapid bow movements, but she couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. She was too close to the end. The 6th variation came with its octave leaps. She had to jump across the fingerboard, hitting notes that were 8 steps apart and do it fast enough that it sounded smooth. Her fingers stretched wide, finding each note exactly where it needed to be. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just pure muscle memory born from countless hours of practice. In the back of her mind, she could hear her parents. They'd both taken time off work to drop her off this morning, something they rarely did because every hour of lost work meant less money for rent and food. Her father had hugged her tight and whispered, "Make us proud, little bean." Her mother had adjusted Maya's collar and said, "You are already everything we could hope for. Just do your best." This was her best. This was everything she had. Every sacrifice her parents made, working long hours so she could have violin strings. Every lesson from her grandmother, given freely in those final years when her hands were too weak to play but her mind still remembered everything. Every lonely hour practicing while other kids played outside. It was all in this music. The eighth variation brought the harmonics, those bell-like tones that sound almost magical. Maya's fingers touched the strings lightly, barely making contact while her bow moved across them. The sound that emerged was ethereal, otherworldly. It didn't sound like a violin anymore. It sounded like something from a dream. The tall judge had his elbows on the table now, his face in his hands. But he wasn't bored or dismissive anymore. He was witnessing something he hadn't expected to witness today, or maybe ever. A child from nowhere, with an old violin that probably cost less than his shoes, playing like she'd been touched by something divine. The round judge had completely given up any pretense of professionalism. He was simply listening, mouth open, completely absorbed. The one with the mustache had tears running down his cheeks. He wasn't even trying to hide them. Maya pushed into the final variations. This was the sprint to the finish line. The tempo increased. Her fingers moved faster than seemed humanly possible. The bow became a blur. Note after note after note, each one perfect, each one exactly where it needed to be. The music built and built, climbing higher and higher. The energy in the room was electric. Everyone was holding their breath without realizing it. The piece was reaching its climax, and Maya was right there with it, giving everything she had left. Her grandmother's words echoed one final time. "When you play Paganini, little bird, you must be fearless. He wrote this music to show off, to prove he was the best. So when you play it, you must believe you are the best. Not with arrogance, but with confidence. Play like you own the stage." Maya played like she owned the stage. She played like her life depended on it. Because in a way it did. This audition was everything. This moment was everything. The final variation exploded forth with all its technical fireworks. Rapid scales. Impossible jumps. Techniques that pushed the violin to its absolute limits. And through it all, that old, worn violin sang. It sang like it was brand new. It sang like it had never stopped singing even after all these years. The last few measures approached. Maya could feel the end coming. Just a few more notes, just a few more seconds. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she ignored them. Almost there. Almost done. And then with one final triumphant note, it was over. The last sound hung in the air, vibrating in the vast space of the audition room. Maya lowered her violin slowly. Her bow arm shook slightly from exhaustion. Her fingers ached. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming somewhere in the building. Maya stood there, bow in one hand, violin in the other, waiting. What happened next would change everything. The silence stretched on. Maya stood frozen on the stage, her arms trembling slightly from the effort of what she'd just done. She didn't know what to expect. Had she done well? Had she messed up somewhere and not noticed? The faces of the judges gave nothing away at first. Then the older woman started to clap. It began slowly, deliberately, her hands coming together in steady rhythm. The sound echoed through the audition room like thunder. The younger man joined in immediately, clapping hard and fast. Then something unexpected happened. The round judge with glasses stood up. He was clapping so hard his face turned red. Then the one with the mustache stood too. And finally the tall one who'd made those cruel comments in the hallway. He rose from his chair like someone in a daze, his hands moving mechanically to clap, but his eyes were wide with something that looked like shock mixed with shame. All 5 judges were on their feet, applauding a 12-year-old girl with a worn violin. The sound filled the room, bouncing off the walls, washing over Maya like a wave. She didn't know what to do. Should she bow? Should she smile? Her grandmother had never taught her what to do after a performance like this, because neither of them had ever imagined she'd be in a place like this. She settled for a small bow, the way she'd seen musicians do in the videos she watched online. When she straightened up, She saw that the older woman judge had tears streaming down her face. The woman was smiling, though, a huge, genuine smile that made Maya's chest feel warm. "Please, dear, come sit down," the older woman said, gesturing to a chair that had been set up near the judge's table. "We'd like to talk with you." Maya carefully placed her violin back in its case, her hands shaking now for a different reason. She wasn't scared anymore. She was overwhelmed. Everything felt surreal, like she might wake up any moment and find herself back in her bedroom. This whole thing just a dream. She walked over to the chair and sat down, clutching her violin case on her lap like a shield. The 5 judges settled back into their seats, but they looked different now. Even the 3 who'd been so dismissive earlier seemed changed somehow, smaller, more human. The older woman spoke first. Her voice was gentle but filled with emotion. "That was extraordinary, truly extraordinary. In my 30 years of teaching here, I've heard hundreds of auditions. What you just did?" She paused, searching for words. "That was one of the finest performances of that piece I've ever witnessed." From anyone, at any age, Maya felt her cheeks get hot. She wasn't used to compliments like this. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. The younger man leaned forward, his eyes bright with curiosity. "I have to ask, where did you study? Who's your teacher? That level of technique doesn't just happen. Someone trained you, and they trained you exceptionally well." This was the question Maya had been dreading, because the answer made her sound like she was lying. But she'd promised herself she'd always be honest, no matter what. "My grandmother taught me," she said quietly. "She was my only teacher." The judges exchanged glances. The tall one spoke for the first time since the performance ended. His voice was different now, softer, with none of the earlier arrogance. "Your grandmother must be quite a remarkable teacher. Is she a professional violinist? Does she teach at a conservatory?" Maya's throat tightened. This was the hard part. She was a professional violinist. In China, a long time ago. But Maya had to stop and take a breath. She passed away 2 years ago. The room went quiet again. The older woman reached across the table and touched Maya's hand briefly. "I'm so sorry, dear." "She was sick for a while," Maya continued, the words coming easier now. "But even when she couldn't play anymore, she could still teach. Every day after school, I'd come home and we'd practice together. She'd sit in her chair by the window and listen, and tell me what to fix, how to make it better." Maya looked down at the violin case in her lap. This was her violin. She played in concert halls all over China when she was young. But then there was political trouble and she had to leave. She came to America with almost nothing. She worked in factories, in restaurants, anywhere she could find work. She never got to perform professionally again. The one with the mustache wiped his eyes. He wasn't even trying to hide his emotions anymore. "And she gave the violin to you?" Maya nodded. "Right before she died. She made me promise I'd keep playing, that I'd never give up on music no matter how hard things got. She said—" Maya's voice cracked a little. "She said I had a gift and it would be a shame to waste it." The round judge cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "And you've had no other instruction? No private lessons? No music school?" "I can't afford lessons," Maya said simply. There was no shame in her voice, just honesty. "My dad works in a restaurant kitchen. My mom sews clothes for a factory. We barely make rent most months. But they always made sure I had violin strings when I needed them, even if it meant they had to skip things they needed." She looked up at the judges. "I practice 4 hours every day. I work at my parents' restaurant in the evenings, helping with dishes and cleaning tables. The tips I get I save for when my violin needs repairs. I learn pieces by listening to recordings from the library, because I can't buy sheet music for everything. But I love it. Music is—" she struggled to find the right words. "It's everything to me. It's the one thing that's mine." The older woman was crying openly now. Even the younger man looked like he was fighting back tears. But it was the tall judge who spoke next, and what he said surprised everyone, including himself probably. "I owe you an apology." His voice was thick with emotion. "Earlier, before you came in, I said some things. Terrible things. About scholarship students. About kids who don't come from wealthy families." He paused, looking directly at Maya. "I was wrong. Completely horribly wrong, and I'm ashamed." Maya didn't know what to say. She'd heard what he said in the hallway. Those words had hurt. But looking at him now, she could see he meant this apology. Real regret showed on his face, The round judge spoke up too. I was part of that conversation. I laughed along. That was cruel and unprofessional, and you deserved better from us. He took off his glasses and cleaned them, a nervous gesture. You've taught me something today. Something I should have learned a long time ago. What you showed us in there, the one with the mustache added, gesturing toward the stage, wasn't just technical skill. It was heart. It was soul. It was everything music should be. And it came from a place of genuine love for the art, not from privilege or expensive training. He shook his head. That's rarer than you know. The older woman pulled out a folder and opened it. Maya, I don't think I need to tell you that you've more than earned the scholarship. But I want you to know something else. This academy has a fund for exceptional students. Students who show not just talent but dedication and character. We'd like to offer you more than just tuition. Maya's heart started pounding again. What do you mean? We'd like to provide you with a professional instrument, the younger man explained. That violin your grandmother gave you is precious and you should keep it always. But for performances and intensive training, you'll need something that can handle the demands we'll be putting on you. And, the older woman continued, we'd like to invite you to be the featured soloist in our spring concert. It's 3 months away. It's held at one of the most prestigious concert halls in the city. Thousands of people attend. It would be an honor to have you perform. Maya couldn't breathe. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. Girls who wore thrift store dresses and carried old violin cases. Girls whose parents counted pennies to make sure there was enough for groceries. She started, but her voice failed her. She tried again. I don't know what to say. Say yes, the older woman said with a warm smile. Say you'll take this opportunity and show the world what you showed us today. Maya thought about her grandmother. About all those hours of practice. About her parents who sacrificed so much so she could have this chance. About the promise she'd made to never give up. Yes, she said. And this time her voice was strong and clear. Yes, I'll do it. The judges smiled. Even the three who'd started the day so full of arrogance looked genuinely happy now. The tall one stood up and offered his hand to shake. Welcome to Riverside Academy, Maya. Something tells me you're going to change this place. Maya shook his hand, still feeling like she was in a dream. But when she looked down at her grandmother's violin case, she knew this was real. This was happening. And somehow she felt like her grandmother was smiling. The older woman walked Maya to the door. Go home and tell your parents the good news. We'll contact you this week with all the details about enrollment and your spring concert performance. And Maya? She squeezed Maya's shoulder gently. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us what music is really about. Maya walked out of that audition room with her head held high. The hallway that had seemed so intimidating a few hours ago didn't scare her anymore. She belonged here now. She'd earned her place not with money or connections, but with talent and heart and thousands of hours of practice. As she pushed through the main doors and stepped into the afternoon sun, Maya whispered to her grandmother wherever she was, I kept my promise, and this is just the beginning. The bus ride home that day felt different. Maya clutched the acceptance letter and scholarship papers to her chest, reading them over and over to make sure they were real. Every word was there in black ink on official letterhead. Full scholarship, spring concert soloist, professional instrument provided. It was all real. When she walked through the door of their small apartment, her parents were waiting. They'd gotten home early from work, something they almost never did. Her mother stood up from the couch the moment Maya entered, her hands clasped together nervously. Her father turned down the TV, his eyes searching Maya's face for any sign of how it went. Maya didn't say anything at first. She just held out the papers. Her mother took them with shaking hands, and as she read, tears started rolling down her cheeks. Her father looked over her shoulder, and his eyes got wider with each line. Then they both rushed forward and wrapped Maya in the tightest hug she'd ever felt. We knew you could do it, little bean, her father said, his voice muffled against her hair. We always knew. That night they celebrated with dumplings from the restaurant where her father worked. He'd brought them home in a container still warm. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. They sat around their small kitchen table laughing and talking about the audition. Maya told them everything, even the parts about the judges who'd been cruel at first. Her mother's face got angry when she heard that part, but Maya quickly explained how they'd apologized, how they'd changed. Good people can make mistakes, her grandmother used to say. What matters is if they learn from them. The next 3 months passed in a blur. Maya started at Riverside Academy the following week, and everything about it was overwhelming at first. The other students had been playing in orchestras since they were tiny. They talked about summer programs in Europe and private lessons with famous musicians. They had practice rooms with perfect acoustics and instruments that cost more than cars. But Maya found her place. There were a few other scholarship students, kids who came from neighborhoods like hers. They formed a small group, eating lunch together and practicing in the same corner of the library. They understood what it was like to feel out of place in a building full of marble and privilege. The older woman judge, whose name was Professor Chen, became Maya's mentor. She was strict but kind, pushing Maya to be even better than she already was. "You have raw talent," she told Maya during their first lesson. "But talent alone isn't enough. We need to refine your technique, broaden your repertoire, and teach you how to perform under pressure." The lessons were intense. Professor Chen made Maya repeat passages over and over, even when Maya thought they sounded fine. "Fine isn't good enough for you," she'd say. "You're capable of extraordinary, so we work until it's extraordinary." But the professor wasn't just teaching her music. She was teaching her confidence. How to walk onto a stage like she belonged there. How to handle nerves. How to recover if she made a mistake. All the things Maya's grandmother would have taught her if she'd had more time. 2 weeks after starting at the academy, Maya received the professional violin they'd promised. It came in a case lined with velvet, and when she opened it, she actually gasped. The instrument was beautiful, made from wood that glowed like honey in the light. The strings were perfect. The bow was balanced exactly right. When she played it for the first time, the sound was so rich and full it almost made her cry. But she never forgot her grandmother's violin. She kept it safe at home, taking it out sometimes just to hold it. That violin had taught her everything. It was part of her history, part of her story. The new one was for performances in school, but her grandmother's violin was for her heart. The tall judge who'd apologized, Professor Williams, started saying hello to her in the hallways. At first it was just a nod, then a quick greeting, then actual conversations. He told her one day that she'd changed how he viewed teaching. "I'd gotten comfortable," he admitted. "I'd forgotten that the best students aren't always the ones with the best advantages. Sometimes they're the ones with the most heart." He even invited her to join his advanced chamber music group, something usually reserved for older students. Maya was nervous about it, but she accepted. Playing with others was different from playing alone. She had to listen, adjust, work as part of a team. It was challenging, but in a good way. The round judge with glasses, Mr. Peterson, taught music theory at the academy. He pulled Maya aside one day after class. "I want you to know something," he said. "What I said before your audition, those words in the hallway, they haunt me. I've been teaching for 25 years, and I'm ashamed that I let prejudice cloud my judgment. You deserved better. Every student deserves better." Maya didn't know what to say, so she just thanked him. He'd been kind to her ever since, always willing to answer questions, always encouraging. People could change. She was seeing proof of it. As the spring concert approached, the pressure mounted. Maya would be performing in front of thousands of people. The concert hall seated over 2,000, and tickets had already sold out. The Academy's spring concert was a major event, attended by wealthy donors, professional musicians, and critics from major newspapers. Professor Chen increased their practice sessions to 4 times a week. They worked on every tiny detail of Maya's performance. How she would walk onto the stage, where she would stand, how she would bow, and of course the music itself. Maya would be playing 2 pieces, including the Paganini Caprice that had won her the scholarship. But doubt started creeping in during the final weeks. Late at night, alone in her room, Maya would think about all those people who'd be watching. What if she messed up? What if her nerves got the better of her? What if everyone realized she was just a kid from a poor neighborhood who didn't really belong in places like this? She shared these fears with her mother one night while they washed dishes together after dinner. Her mother dried her hands on a towel and turned to face her. "You know what I think about when I'm scared?" she asked. "I think about why I'm doing what I'm doing. I sew clothes in that factory because I love you and your father. That love is bigger than my fear. So what's your why, little bean?" Maya thought about it. "I love music, and I made a promise to grandmother." "There's your answer," her mother said. "When you're standing on that stage, scared and nervous, remember why you're there. Remember the promise. Remember the love. That's bigger than any fear. The week of the concert arrived. Maya barely slept. She practiced until her fingers hurt, then practiced some more. Professor Chen finally had to tell her to stop. "You'll tire yourself out," she said. "You're ready, trust me." "You're more than ready." The day before the concert, something unexpected happened. Maya was in a practice room when there was a knock on the door. She opened it to find the judge with the mustache. "Mr. Harrison." He was holding a small box. "This belonged to my mother," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a small treble clef pendant. She was a pianist. She wore this to every performance she ever gave. She said it reminded her that music was a gift, and that sharing it with others was an honor. "I'd like you to wear it tomorrow night, if you want to." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I can't take this. It's too precious. You can borrow it," he smiled. "And maybe someday, when you're a famous violinist and some young student reminds you why you started playing in the first place, you'll lend it to them." Maya accepted the necklace carefully. The weight of it in her hand felt significant, like she was being trusted with something important. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Maya couldn't eat dinner. Her stomach was too full of butterflies. Her parents tried to distract her with funny stories from work, but she could barely focus. Tomorrow night, everything would change. Either she'd prove that she belonged at Riverside Academy, or she'd fail in front of thousands of people. She took out her grandmother's violin and just held it. Not to play, just to hold. She closed her eyes and tried to feel her grandmother's presence. "I'm scared," she whispered to the empty room. "What if I'm not good enough?" The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Her grandmother's voice from years ago. "Scared means you care, little bird. Scared means it matters. So be scared, then play anyway." Maya opened her eyes. She carefully put her grandmother's violin away and looked at her concert outfit hanging on the door, a simple black dress the academy had provided. Elegant but not flashy. Tomorrow she'd wear that dress, the borrowed necklace, and walk onto the biggest stage of her life. She thought about everyone who'd be there. Professor Chen, Professor Williams, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Harrison. Her parents sitting in the audience, probably crying before she even started playing. The other scholarship students who'd told her they'd be cheering for her. All the people who doubted her at first but believed in her now. And she thought about her grandmother who'd given her everything. The violin, the lessons, the love of music that burned so bright it had carried Maya through the hardest days of her life. Tomorrow wasn't just about proving herself to others. It was about honoring a promise. It was about showing that a gift freely given could change everything. It was about a girl with a worn violin case and a heart full of music stepping into her destiny. Maya climbed into bed and, surprisingly, fell asleep almost immediately. And in her dreams, she played. Not in a concert hall full of thousands, just in a small room with a window where the afternoon light came through, and her grandmother sat in a chair, eyes closed, listening. And smiling. The concert hall was even more overwhelming than Maya had imagined. She stood backstage, peeking through a gap in the curtains at the sea of people filling the seats. Every single seat was taken. People lined the walls in the back, standing because there was nowhere else to go. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting warm light over everything. Maya touched the borrowed necklace at her throat. The small treble clef pendant felt cool against her skin. She was wearing the black dress, her hair pulled back simply, and she held her violin case with both hands. The professional instrument the academy had given her waited inside, perfectly tuned and ready. 5 minutes. A stagehand called out softly. Professor Chen appeared beside her, placing a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "How are you feeling?" Maya's mouth was dry. "Terrified," the professor smiled. "Good, that means you're human. But remember what I taught you. The fear is just energy. You're going to take that energy and pour it into your music. Can you do that?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "Your parents are in the 3rd row," Professor Chen said. "I made sure they got the best seats, and Maya, no matter what happens out there tonight, I'm proud of you. Your grandmother would be proud of you." Those words steadied Maya somehow. She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. This was it. Everything she'd worked for. Everything her grandmother had taught her. Everything her parents had sacrificed for. It all came down to the next 30 minutes. The lights in the hall dimmed. The audience noise faded to whispers, then to complete silence. Maya heard the master of ceremonies walk onto the stage. his footsteps echoing in the quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Riverside Academy's annual spring concert. Tonight we have something very special for you. Please welcome our featured soloist, a young violinist who has taken this academy by storm in just 3 short months, Maya Chen. The applause began even before Maya stepped onto the stage. She walked out slowly, the way Professor Chen had taught her. Head up, shoulders back, walk like you belong here. The stage lights were bright and hot. Beyond them she could barely see the audience, just a dark mass of people and the occasional glint of jewelry or glasses. She found her mark at the center of the stage. Set down her case, opened it carefully, lifted out the violin that still felt almost too beautiful to be hers. The applause continued as she positioned the violin under her chin and raised her bow. Then the hall fell silent again. Maya closed her eyes. For just a moment, she let herself go back to that small apartment with the jasmine tea smell in the chair by the window. She felt her grandmother's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. Play for yourself, little bird. Play for the love of it. Everything else will follow. She opened her eyes, took one breath, and began. The first piece was Bach, a partita that required precision and grace. Maya's fingers found their positions automatically, muscle memory taking over. The notes floated out into the hall clear and pure. She could feel the audience leaning forward, listening intently. This was different from the audition. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. This was about sharing something beautiful with people who'd come to hear it. She moved through Bach's complex passages with confidence she didn't know she had. Every bowstroke was deliberate. Every note meant something. She wasn't just playing the right notes. She was telling a story with them, painting pictures in sound. When the Bach ended, the applause was thunderous. Maya allowed herself a small smile and a bow. But the real test was coming. The piece that had won her the scholarship. The piece that had changed everything. Paganini's Caprice No. 24. She raised her violin again. This time when she closed her eyes, she thought about the journey. The first time her grandmother placed a violin in her hands when she was 5 years old. The countless hours of practice in that tiny bedroom. The morning her grandmother gave her the old violin with shaking hands and made her promise. The audition where 3 teachers laughed at her. This moment right now, standing on a stage in front of thousands. The opening notes of the Paganini rang out strong and clear. Maya dove into it fearlessly. The variations came one after another, each more difficult than the last. Her fingers flew across the fingerboard. Her bow arm moved with strength and precision. She executed the double stops perfectly. The rapid string crossings that had taken months to master flowed effortlessly. Somewhere in the audience, her father grabbed her mother's hand and squeezed it tight. They watched their daughter, their little bean, doing the impossible. Her mother's face was already wet with tears, and her father wasn't far behind. Professor Williams sat in the front row with the other academy teachers. He watched Maya with something like wonder on his face. 3 months ago, he'd almost dismissed this girl without hearing her play. He'd judged her by her clothes and her old violin case. Now she was showing everyone what he'd almost missed. The thought humbled him. It would humble him for the rest of his career. Maya reached the infamous pizzicato section, plucking strings with her left hand while bowing with her right. The audience gasped softly. Even people who knew nothing about violin could tell this was something special. This was technique most professionals couldn't match, and she was 12 years old. The harmonics section came next, those bell-like tones that sounded otherworldly. The concert hall's acoustics carried them perfectly, filling every corner of the space with magic. People in the back rows heard it as clearly as people in the front. For a moment, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Maya pushed into the final variations. This was where everything came together. All the speed, all the technique, all the emotion. She gave it everything she had. The violin sang under her fingers like it was alive. The bow moved so fast it became a blur. Note after note after note building toward the climax. And then she was there. The final measures. The home stretch. She could feel the ending coming like a wave. Just a few more notes. Just a few more seconds. Her arms ached. Her fingers hurt. She didn't care. None of that mattered. Only the music mattered. The last note rang out, held long and true, then faded into silence. Maya lowered her violin slowly. Her chest heaved with exhaustion. Sweat dripped down her face. For one heartbeat, too, the hall was completely quiet. Then it exploded. The entire audience leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening. People were cheering, shouting, crying. Her parents were on their feet, clutching each other. Professor Chen was clapping with tears streaming down her face. Professor Williams, Mr. Peterson, and Mr. Harrison all stood together, applauding until their hands hurt. But Maya barely heard any of it. She was looking up past the stage lights, past the ceiling, to somewhere beyond. Thank you, she thought. Thank you for everything, grandmother. I kept my promise. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Maya bowed once, twice, 3 times. People wouldn't stop clapping. Finally, she had to walk off stage because her legs were shaking so badly she thought she might fall. The moment she was behind the curtain, she collapsed into Professor Chen's arms, crying. Not sad tears. Release tears. Joy tears. Every emotion she'd been holding in for 3 months came pouring out. You did it, Professor Chen whispered, holding her tight. You beautiful, brilliant girl. You did it. After the concert, there was a reception in the hall's lobby. Maya was surrounded immediately. People wanted to shake her hand, take photos with her, tell her how incredible she was. Professional musicians gave her their cards. A representative from a major symphony orchestra asked if she'd be interested in performing with them. Someone mentioned a recording contract. It was overwhelming, but Maya's parents stayed close, protective, and proud. Her father kept saying the same thing to everyone. That's our daughter. That's our little bean. Her mother couldn't stop crying happy tears. Professor Williams approached with the other 2 judges who'd apologized. Maya, he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. What you did tonight, that wasn't just music. That was transcendent. You've reminded all of us why we became teachers in the first place. Thank you. 3 months ago, Maya would have been angry at these men. But looking at them now, seeing genuine admiration and respect in their eyes, she felt something different. Forgiveness, growth, hope. Thank you for giving me a chance, she said simply. As the crowd finally thinned and people started leaving, Maya found a quiet corner with her parents. They sat together on a velvet bench, just the 3 of them, not saying much. Sometimes you don't need words. Maya touched the necklace at her throat, thinking about Mr. Harrison's mother who wore it to every performance. Someday, maybe she'd lend it to another young musician who needed to remember why music matters. She'd pass on the gift, just like her grandmother had passed it to her. What are you thinking about, little bean? Her father asked. Maya looked at her parents, at these 2 people who'd worked so hard to give her every opportunity, who'd believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest person in the world. Her mother kissed the top of her head. We're the lucky ones. They sat together in that quiet corner as the concert hall emptied around them. A girl from a working-class neighborhood. A worn violin case that had seen better days. A promise kept to a grandmother who'd given her everything, and a future that stretched out ahead, bright and full of possibility. Maya Chen had started this day as a scholarship student trying to prove she belonged. She ended it as a musician who'd touched thousands of hearts. But the best part was she was still just herself. Still the girl who helped wash dishes at her parents' restaurant. Still the granddaughter who talked to her grandmother's memory in quiet moments. Still someone who understood that the greatest music comes not from privilege but from love. And that was the real story. Not about a girl who could play violin impossibly well, but about a girl who remembered why she played at all.